All right, and I think we're live. So again, welcome to today's COVES webinar. It's September, and we're going to be doing a little sharing out of our revised COVES dashboard. Alex is going to be screen sharing a little bit, and we're going to be showing parts of the new COVID COVES survey. We do have about 9 institutions that are collecting data, contributing to an aggregated dashboard, which is going to be the focal point of the share out. But our intention is to share this out even with institutions that are still closed or maybe unable to collect data right now, to inform their decision making. And then we're happy to answer questions or talk about next steps as you may have them. So unless there are questions preceding any of the sharing we're going to do, I'm going to pass this off to Alex.
Okay, yeah, great. So I'm going to just share my screen. And for those of you who've looked at a dashboard before, it will look, the same format relatively. I did send an email kind of late Friday, my favorite time to email, as Ryan often ribs me about, just notifying you that if you log into your dashboard the normal way, should you remember how to do that, you would see like a COVES COVID-19 dashboard as well, and you would just be able to look at it. But if you haven't been able to do that, it's not a problem at all. I only got one email from someone who had forgotten the password, which I did not believe. I believe there's probably more people who forgot the password. So if that's your case, if that's the case for you, just let me know anytime. But I'm going to share my screen and just show you the dashboard and what's on it, and then we can kind of talk about it and answer your questions. So the first thing I want to kind of note is that if you happen to have logged in, you will see something different, slightly different, depending on if you are currently collecting data or not, basically. It's just kind of a funky thing with the permissions. Obviously, all the aggregate data is here. It's pulling from the one giant survey, so every institution that's collecting data, all that data is coming into this dashboard. But just because of the COVES system and agreement that we have with everyone, if you are at Science World, you can see Science World's data and aggregate data, but you wouldn't be able to click the drop down and navigate to see St. Louis Science Center's data specifically. And the way that so if you have data, your data gets filtered, and then you can see those two things. If you don't have any data, I wanted you to be able to see something. So basically all the data is just there without any filters. But there's just a couple separate pages because of the way the filters function. If you are collecting data, the one difference is that I haven't figured out yet a way to let you see all of the open-ended comments that aren't from your own institution, because that's something that we've talked about being really interesting and valuable. And I'm kind of working on that, but for now, this is kind of the solution we have. So this is what you would see if you're not open, or if you're not collecting data or whatever, but you log in and you go to the COVID COVES dashboard. And Ryan, I'm seeing the chat go, so if there's something I should address, just hop in and let me know.
We already got a shout out for quick access to data, which I'll let you talk about.
Great, cool. A nice thing that I can do if there's no data filters turned on, is you can see the institutions that are represented. So this is the staffed data collection page. As you have probably seen our communications about, right, we have different methods of data collection to kind of adapt to COVID right now. So our regular old staff data collection done socially distanced, or emailing, or unstaffed. And I'm not even going to go to unstaffed right now because I don't think there's anything in it for folks who are, I don't even know how many folks are actively doing it every day, but there haven't really been any data coming in. So we have staffed and we have email right now, but we don't want to put them together because the methods are different. So you can see there's 4 institutions who are doing in-person staff data collection and have surveys that have come in the last 30 days. To kind of compensate for this being a live dashboard, I've tried to do a little bit of data cleaning on the front end, I guess, to omit any lower quality surveys or a 16-year-old who happened to take the survey as we would have done normally. And we just lead it off right here with the COVID-19 shared questions. So you can see the percent of visitors that were feeling concerned about, or the degree of concern they were feeling before their visit, and then the extent to which the museum addressed their concerns. And then you can see a little bit more of what they said in terms of, how they felt about the health and safety efforts at the museum, or what concerns that were not, addressed. Like none, even though they said that. So you could easily see someone who had concerns, but they weren't concerns that were reasonable for the museum to address, because we're all concerned right now. Some of which we can do something about, and some of which we can't. And the other shared question we have is just how people are feeling in terms of touching any available touchable interactives. I know some of you don't even really have anything that's open and touchable right now, so you're not seeing that one at the moment, but some folks do, so you can kind of see maybe as you do start to open some of your touchable interactives, what people's level of comfort might be with touching those things. And then, a lot of the rest of it is a little bit more familiar COVES questions, the motivations for visiting. Although, if you recall, we do have some new COVID categories, right? So, and yet at the same time, to spend time together as a group or family, still rising to the top, as it has historically been, in at least the top two, but usually the number one motivation for our visitors. The highest I see here to support, the institution, whether that's OMSI or Science World or the Museum of Science, that one is higher among the new reasons we've added. You can also see to relax or relieve stress is there, to return to a normal routine, and a different reason. We added that to make sure we were not missing anything. But frankly, there's not anything really groundbreaking in these last 30 days. OmniMax. Okay, yeah. And then our 0 to 10 ratings, the one change here was the exhibits we tried were in good working order. But you can kind of see and compare these to what they were before. Your overall experience rating and why, and NPS categories, and why. We don't have an NPS score right here now. We didn't really feel that it would be quite the right metric for a live dashboard that is at the moment. We're kind of just thinking of it as kind of rolling data updates, and then we would clean the data and put it into your existing dashboard once it can kind of fit into that format. And so an NPS is like maybe not the right thing to look at right now, but if you really want to calculate it, you can do the subtraction here. And then here we have the last visit. When was the last time you visited? With kind of the understanding that there was extended closures for most of us. And interestingly, there's already some folks who have visited multiple times since museums reopened. And now some of us have been open for almost 3 months at this point among the earliest openers. So it's not too surprising that there might be some people who are coming multiple times and getting the survey again. And here you can, read people's comments and then look at the demographics. We might expect to see a higher percentage of locals, or I'm not sure what you might expect in terms of adult only versus groups of kids. And so we're looking at the staff data collection right now. So it's a little bit easier to think about comparing the data we're seeing right in front of us and the data that we collected pre-pandemic. Whereas with the email data collection, it's a little bit trickier and you can't really do the comparison in the same way. But luckily with the staff, that's a little bit more sensible. And disability membership, since this is aggregate, it's going to be a little bit more useful to know, for your own institution, what a typical membership number might be. The race and ethnicity question. Oh, I guess maybe this is a little bit technical, but one thing to point out is that if you remember looking at this variable in the dashboard before, we had done some recoding to say categorize anyone who selected multiple categories into a new category that was multiple races selected. Because this is live, we don't really have that ability right now. So this is just straight up percentages of what people are selecting. And then one new thing to point out is that visitors who've experienced a change in income due to COVID, and about a third of our visitors, and this is, I looked at the email data too, it's pretty close to about a third have experienced a decrease in income. And Elisa actually had sent an email a couple days ago suggesting that a really interesting crosstab to look at is to look at kind of cross-referencing those who've experienced that income change with what their household income was before the pandemic, which is what this income chart is showing. It's showing the question says, you know, before the pandemic hit, what was your household income? And I think, Elisa, what you mentioned, I didn't get a chance to make the chart yet, was that folks who had lower incomes in the first place were more likely to experience a decrease. So I'll make that chart so you can see what that actual number is, but a really, you know, powerful and kind of important statistic to think about and remember. And so that's it. That's the, you know, it's the shared questions. You can look at the email page is, you know, pretty much exactly the same. You can see different institutions represented, heavily skewed toward the Museum of Science, although less and less every day. But at first it was, Museum of Science was really kind of dominating this since we started earlier and emailed a lot of people. But again, it's really quite similar, and interesting in the future probably to sort of look at the differences in sampling between the email and the staffed methods to see, you know, especially for a site that's doing both, to kind of understand, you know, what the biases might be in that email sampling and how we might account for those in the future. So I guess, I mean, that's the long and short of it. You know, the major differences are that you won't see your institution specific questions at the moment. This is a little bit of an experiment for us, kind of connecting the survey like this to the dashboard like this to the live survey. So like, if you sat here and you refresh the dashboard a few times over the course of the day, you would see the survey totals go up and up and up maybe every time you looked at it. Whereas the existing dashboard is more static because we just did the upload monthly. So you won't see as many of those variables we created, like institution size or you know, whether it's a children's focused museum or not, that you can use to filter by. There's not the like direct comparison to the aggregate page. So it's a little bit more of like a, I would say quick and dirty, but like a quick and not too dirty, like it's not that bad. Not completely cleaned up format. And I think it would be possible to add in everyone's institution specific questions, probably on your own page. But I think we're gonna kind of wait and see what we wanna do with the system, the dashboard reporting system moving forward. You know, do we feel like the cleaning is, you know, that we want to keep doing that process so that we can get all those variables that you might use to filter, and this live dashboard can just be like a quick check and you can, you know, use it to, or do we want to move to doing a live thing more permanently as the primary dashboard? I could see it would be possible that we would move in that direction, but I just don't think we know yet. So for now, your institution specific questions, if you're really curious about what those are, before they get cleaned and uploaded into the, you know, existing dashboard, the best thing is to just look at the raw data, and you know, we can always provide that to you. So I'll you know, stop there. I saw a lot of chat messages, so I hope I'm like, applying to people's questions, but
I will. Well, let's go over some of the questions together. So I asked you a question privately. I don't think it's very meaningful, but there were some green charts and some blue charts.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Is there a significant reason for the colors, or is that just an artifact of new dashboard, old dashboard?
That was something I wanted to say, actually. So I tried to do, let me get the colors right. And I'm going to add a note on the demographics header, but use the green color for group level demographics and the blue color for individual level demographics. So I'll make a note of that. I actually forgot to write, you know, why. Just because kind of the, yeah.
So obviously we're still making changes. If you all have suggestions for notes to add or disclaimers or crosstabs, stuff like that, we can do that. There was a good question from Jadana, basically asking about, for the email method, the visit date is better than the survey completed date. Is there a filter available for that, or will there be?
Yeah, that one, there's like some kind of technical issue that I'm working through with that variable of visit date and the dashboard just like not recognizing it as a date. And I just wasn't able to solve it myself. So I think I just need to email Qualtrics about it. I'm not really sure why. So that is definitely the ideal. So I'd like to switch it to that if I can makes it the dashboard recognize it correctly. Because yeah, it's true. Like you send the email, but you don't necessarily know like how close that is to their actual visit. So.
And then are the institution's represented tables available for all of the sites when they log into their dashboards?
Yeah, so that's a little bit of the confusing thing that I was mentioning when I first started talking. I don't know how deep to get into it, but basically, if you've started collecting data, there's an automatic like filter that's like, oh, you should only show Natural History Museum of LA County, and if you put that same table in, it only shows Natural History Museum of LA County, which is great, but that's not what I wanted the table to do. So because of the necessity of kind of having that filter, it like doesn't work. So I don't know if there's a better way. I'm trying to figure out if there's a better way so that, because I know it's useful to see, but the dashboard reads it as like, oh, that's not your data, so you can't see it. Oh, I think Josh, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I have a question that's just easier to say than to type out. It's about the methods. So we have the staffed data collection, and then we have the email data collection, and we have the unstaffed. And I have two questions. The first is like, has COVES put out sort of guidance for doing those similarly so that everybody can kind of standardize the way they're doing email if they're doing email, or the way they're doing unstaffed if they're doing unstaffed? And the second question is, could we put more description in the dashboard for each one at the top so that like people in my institution who are not evaluators and don't know all the backstory of like what it means to email could look at it and be like, oh, I see what they did. So, okay, so they got people's emails like on the way out, or maybe throughout the museum. Like, I don't even know exactly what people are doing. And then they sent it out, and it'd be great. Maybe, or maybe there could be like just a link to the guidance page that says, you know, we send an email twice and then we give up, or we send an email 4 times and then we give up, or whatever the standard method is. It'd be great so people can just see what that means.
That's a great idea, because we, you know, at the Museum of Science, we decided to start with the email so that we didn't have anything in person. And I think we're still kind of learning what the maybe the best method. We think we're over collecting essentially. Like, we don't think we need to be getting as many surveys as we are. We didn't really know how many we're going to get, but because we're sending the email to every single person whose ticket is scanned. So one of the questions that we've been figuring it out with sites who are saying, I want to email. So I think a few weeks ago is a little bit too early for us to say like, this is the best way. But I think at this point, there's a little bit more consolidation among folks who are emailing, just because we've been able to have those conversations. And so I think my impression is that most of us are sending an email to everyone whose ticket is scanned, or that's the way the emails are collected. It's through the ticket purchasing process, and then the actual visiting. And that email usually goes out the next day. So not like right after they visit or anything. So it goes out the day after they visit. And then the survey, I'm not sure in terms of like how good I think the link is probably good forever. But once they start the survey, they get like 72 hours to take it before it says like, if they abandon it, then it just gets considered incomplete if they don't return to it. So that's all information we could totally add, and especially if people think that it would be useful, or like you say, add like a link to a document or something. I think you had a first part of your question and I forgot what it was.
Yeah, it was just, have we standardized? Like,
yeah.
Is everybody doing, like you just described what MOS is doing, is everybody doing it that way? Like,
so before we get into how everyone's doing it with the email method, the obvious note here is just that everyone's CRM or database kind of functions differently. So Alex already mentioned that we send our emails the day after. It has something to do with the way our database like processes the ticket scanned and dedupes and does like something, but
it or something.
Yeah, it doesn't happen until midnight or something. And we actually don't even have it automated. It's still a manual trigger that we pull a list on. So it's a whole lot of work, and it changes from institution to institution how easy or hard those lists are to access. Your comment about reminding people would be amazing, and I think for a panel survey we'd do that. But because we're right now doing census sampling, there's no need to remind people. Either they do it or they don't. Holly, you asked a great question about click rates and open rates. I've only got about a week's worth of data from when we first started doing this, and we're kind of panicked over what kind of data we were going to see. We got an average open rate of 29%. So of the emails we sent, 29% of people opened the email, and then 12% of all people clicked the survey link. For census sampling, that's still pretty good. As Alex mentioned, we're getting too much data. We've engaged in a couple conversations with sites represented here who want to do less than census. They don't want to barrage everyone that they have emails for with this survey process. So they're randomly selecting like 50% of scanned tickets or email addresses available. So those are all options. But again, part of this, the tricky part of standardizing that is that it's really going to depend on if you can automate it, how much person time it takes, and what kind of systems you have in place. I do love the idea of putting a link to some kind of informational piece at the top of the dashboard, though. Other questions or thoughts? Maybe they're related to the dashboard. Maybe they're just about COVES or data collection or museum reopening.
I feel like
This is our
a comment somewhere up here, and I don't want to put Jadana on the spot while she's eating lunch, but you said something about you're using the live data already, and I'm curious if like how that's featured in your. I know you're having like weekly meetings or something, like how that's featuring in.
Yeah. So it's been incredible to have access to the data so quickly, even though it's messy, and we try and let people know that. But every Monday there's a meeting where people get together and say, how did this weekend go? How did last weekend go? What can we predict about next week? And so we combine our attendance data and our ticketing sale information with some of the things from COVES to just point out what people are paying attention to, how they feel when they're walking around our building, and if we're addressing their concerns, what concerns they seem to have. And so the staff made a bunch of changes. After the first 2 weekends we were open just with members, the last 2 weekends we've been open have been for anybody who wants to come. But people were feeling, a lot of people commented on lack of crowds in a good way. A lot of people noticed a lot of the cleaning efforts we're doing. But we had some anti-maskers, so like some of that came up more on the floor and in interactions than it did in the survey. We're hearing a lot more from members than we are from non-members, and because we just changed our method, well, actually looking at the attendance data, it looks like we're oversampling members a little bit. I think we're also getting probably a little bit more data than we need, so that might be something we talk to you about. But they've changed how many hand sanitizer things they have out on the floor. They've changed how staff approach people because of this data. They've changed from just having extra styluses for interacting with exhibits on hand to proactively offering them to people as they come in and they're approaching something that's interactive. And they've changed some of our more like physical activities like sportsology. If you've seen that exhibit, there's a lot of running and jumping and balancing and playing. They've changed the setup of that a little bit in response to visitor comments. So those are just some of the ways that we've used the data.
Yeah, that's great.
It's been really helpful. And now having it in a pretty dashboard that I don't have to make. Well, the dashboard I'm making is clunky as all get out using Data Studio, and this is awesome. So thank you.
Just glad it's useful.
I'll just follow up on that briefly. I'm looking at the MOS data, and obviously we're also using the email method. Our dashboard shows roughly 59% of the data as members, and I've been tracking our attendance pretty regularly, i.e. daily. And I can tell you that our ticket sales or our tickets scanned reflect like 37% members. 37% members is higher than it used to be this time last year, but obviously much lower than 69%. So if you are using the dashboard to kind of break down how people are feeling, OER, NPS, any of those ratings, make sure you toggle members and non-members, because that's a great point. Whether it's anti-maskers or people who are familiar with the experience or not, you're probably gonna have a skew in your data.
I'm interested by Jessica's comment that you're oversampling members at Science World, even with the in-person method, because we always, like, my big takeaway was when we started COVES in the first place at the Museum of Science was like, we had been oversampling members for several years with our email, our old email method. So I wasn't surprised to see oversampling of members when we went back to email, but it's interesting to hear that it's the case for in-person as well.
Yeah, and we were actually really concerned that we would be undersampling members, because we tend to do data collection towards the end of the day, and we often get our members coming with young kids early in the morning, and so we tend't to just miss them altogether. But apparently that's not the case, so we're still gonna have to figure something else
out. So Josh, just directly responding to your question about toggling for members and non-members, there are a lot of filters embedded at the top. Some of those we have to lock to make sure the dashboards function, so some real estate gets compromised. Remember, you can scroll down to that widget and click the members bar or click the non-members bar to toggle those and have the data filter. And for those of you who are embarking on this either through data collection or planning your reopening, this is my monthly plug for Aztec's reopening survey, because they are helping everyone keep track of attendance numbers for your institution and other institutions to make those comparisons. So if you're thinking about proportion of members or comparisons to last year, you can always participate in the Aztec attendance survey.
Ryan, do you have a perspective on Beth's question about how much would you say is too much data?
I didn't see that one. The
when
answer,
it feels like too much.
The answer, you won't be surprised to hear, is it depends. It depends how you're using the data. It depends what kind of comparisons you want to make or the filters you want to throw on it. For example, I just talked about the proportion of members, non-members. Typically, it's flip-flop, right? We usually get more non-members than members in our sample. So if I wanted to do any kind of non-member comparison of my current data to last year's data, or maybe as Yadana is explaining or some other people are chatting about, using the data more frequently, larger sample sizes are great. We never ever would have recommended doing week-to-week comparisons ever before this. But now, if you got enough data, I would say, like, well, we've never done statistical significance testing using this. So those sample sizes aren't going to influence your ability to make statistical inferences. But practical interpretations require a sufficient amount of data to say, well, our attendance is lower, but we've got 120 surveys from the last 2 weeks. That's pretty good. So I don't know what too much data is until you're getting to that point where you're looking at like fractions of a percent and trying to say things are different, just eyeballing it, right? I guess the converse to your question is there's obviously such a thing as too little data. And without going into any specific data point, I would just say 100 responses feels good. When we get into stuff like Net Promoter Score, you want more because of the ability to have sampling error, and it depends on the time frame. I'm looking again at the Museum of Science's dashboard right now. In the month of August, we had roughly 500 surveys. So that means we're going to have, what, 6,000 by the end of the year, which is more than 3 times what we typically get. That's too much data. So Beth, when you start emailing your visitors, I say we monitor your response rate and the amount of data coming in before figuring out what too much data looks like. So for everyone else using the email method, get a month under your belt, see how much data are coming in, see how much data you're used to, see how you're using the data. If you're doing those weekly teams, Jadana, I'm sure you're not complaining about too much data yet, but you're getting to the point where you're saying, great, we don't need all of this all the time, because you've already made some decisions and some changes. Again, the conversations I've had with people who are worried about this, they're randomly sampling 50% of those email lists, which is a great way to start if you're worried about too much data.
Ryan, I will
Yes.
say we've done, so we've had 2 member preview weekends. We were supposed to have our big opening last weekend, but we had to shut down for air quality issues. And I have a feeling member response rates are going to be higher because we actually had a 32% response rate from the survey to our emails, which I would not expect from general public, but I really have zero clue at this point. When we open to general public, we'll continue to email, and then we have 2 signs for the unstaffed. So be able to tell a little more later, but.
Yeah, keep in mind that it's obviously true members are going to be more likely to respond just based on seeing your institutional name in their inbox. There could also be not firewall issues, but your email might be going to the junk or spam email address or folder of your non-members. So there's this like automatic lowered response rate, even if they are willing to fill out the survey. So that will definitely change as you get into full public emailing. But yeah, just, we'll keep an eye on how much data are coming in and what constitutes too much. And Leanne and Alex, we should have the same conversation internally. Okay, open floor for anything COVES now. It's 38 minutes past the hour. We love our community and we want to chat with you all the time, but we're also happy to give you 20 minutes of your days back if that's prudent. Our goal here today was to highlight the COVES dashboard and make sure you were able to ask questions and gain access if you forgot how to. Sarah, am I missing anything big picture community-wise?
I don't think so.
I was going to ask, I thought I might have typed it, but I'm curious if people are finding comparisons to pre-COVID actually useful right now. Like for us, it's just going to be a totally different experience. We're only open outdoors right now. So I'm wondering at what point, like you feel like there's kind of enough time to say like, this is new normal compared to old normal, or just those comparisons aren't going to work.
The only comparisons we've been doing pre and post, and we're maybe a bit unique here in that we're a free institution, so we have advanced registration, but we're not able to track, is this a member ticket? Is this a student ticket? It's just one blanket ticket to enter? We've been looking at, based on our survey data, how many members are responding, and then also the question about frequency of visit, because we're seeing that we started really strong with members as the majority of our visitors, and then that has tracked down as we've been open for 2 months. We also started really strong with visitors that identify that they visit very frequently, and that's held, which helps us actually try to figure out what a new normal around attendance is, because this is our closest thing to be able to see that we're not bringing new people in at this point. New people are not coming to visit. First-time visitors are not coming. So if first-time visitors are not coming, and we normally know what kind of attendance percentage that accounts for, how do we then apply that out to projections for the next quarter, the next year? We haven't been comparing any other data points, just those 2. And it really is centered around being able to understand what a normal attendance week might look like, if that's helpful.
It's super helpful to hear about, Rachel. we're using it just like you are to create like a new benchmark, because the experience is very different, the context is really different, and the method is so different that comparing a random sample that we approach people to get with our email data collection just doesn't feel appropriate. So that's really what we're trying to message to internally as well. Is like, what do you think this means moving forward? Not, what about our OER rating from February? Fortunately, nobody is saying that kind of stuff, so it makes it really helpful.
Yeah, I would say for us, because so we've been open like 3 months now, maybe more. I've lost track, and it was one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure to do COVES in the same format of the in-person solicitation for participation. And in fact, even before COVES was ready, I was doing my own slimmed down version of it, both in person and via email, so that we could make comparisons about who's coming. And for us, we saw that for the most part, demographically, speaking generally, there were some blips in there that were a little bit different, but demographically, it looked very much similar to what we were accustomed to seeing. Just in, the overall numbers were down, but the distributions were pretty similar. We looked at, does stay time at the museum change? And it really hasn't changed that much for us. And so looking at things like that, and I will say, comparing what we've done on our own slim down email survey compared to what we're seeing through COVES, and then through what we were doing before COVES on site, we're definitely, we get more, the email survey, I liken it to our comment cards, because we're getting the people who care more about us for some reason, because they're members, they're local, something like that, or they have something they really want to say on one end of the spectrum or the other. And so, like, I was noticing things like our NPS and our OER were stronger on our in-person survey than they were on the email responses. And I think that has to do with, if somebody really was upset about something, whatever that something was, they responded to the survey. Or if they really loved us, we definitely had more members respond, a higher percentage of members on our online version than when we do it on site. So the on-site stuff, I've been using that to make some of those basic comparisons about what people are doing and who's coming.
We were also, I'll just jump in, one of the ratings that we were really happy to take a look at was the value for the cost, with some of our exhibits off the floor and one of our galleries still closed. As I think probably a lot of institutions did, we talked a lot about whether we should change our pricing. And so being able to see that rating was really helpful for us, and we felt like it was still a fair comparison to compare to, what we were getting last year.
Okay.
Well.
So can you, cool, thanks for sharing, everyone, and posing a lot of questions. Alex and Ryan, can you recap what the next steps are for the dashboards and what are the pieces we're adding? Because I feel like there's a lot of popcorn around all of that. I did not write a list. I hope one of you did.
Next steps for the dashboard, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, as I said, it's a little bit experimental, so not necessarily set in stone yet, but what Ryan and I are trying to do is to take the existing data take the data that you're collecting now, and kind of wrestle it into a format that can go into your old dashboard, you know, with some additional charts for like the COVID things or something like that. Maybe a new filter that's like pre-closure, post, whatever that looks like for you. Understanding that that gets a little complicated for some people who had to do multiple closings and reopenings. So that's kind of what we're thinking through. So, and then having this live dashboard as like for that month that you're collecting data, you can refer to this and it'll kind of automatically go to the most recently collected data. And you can check on that for your immediate data needs. But then when you want to go back and like look over time or do longer term comparisons, you'll have all of your data, no matter how it was collected or where, although, you know, organized appropriately by method and stuff like that, and able to separate where you need to separate. Of course, that's like a lot of, you know, making two different data sets talk to each other, which can be kind of complicated. So I hope that the live dashboard will, you know, kind of help out for now. And I don't know, was I missing anything there? And then I think like to just try to use this live dashboard, try to, if you're open, look at it. If you're not open, look at it and say, you know, try to see if any of the data in there are useful for the questions that you're thinking about at your site. Like, you know, are people asking questions about how visitors might behave or what they might want or what their biggest concerns are? Can you use the data from this dashboard to help at your institution to answer those questions? Just see how it's useful, or if it's useful, and tell us about it. Tell us. It's really good to know, like from you, Shana, and Jessica and folks, like, yeah, we're using it. It's useful. That's a really good thing to know. And then also to think about the dashboard that already exists. Like, how might you want to use them in the future? Can you think of a different or system that might be more useful for you? And just, you know, let us know, be in conversation with us about it, because we want to make this very strange period of data collection. We want to, you know, eventually kind of be able to integrate it into the story of your institutional data, and have a way that all makes sense. So just give it a try, you know, see how it goes, and tell us about it. And I see, Jessica, you just asked one more question here. We'll be able to see the handy daily count of surveys. Yes, I can make that more simpler to look at.
I know you can't show us in other institutions on the dashboard, but I would really be curious at some point to do some comparisons. I mean, we're in different geographic regions, but we have different policies and approaches, and at some point it might be interesting to compare what people are comfortable with or not comfortable with. I don't know, kind of an open question, but at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that type of comparison is, you know, we write an aggregate report every year, and the timing of COVID this year was right when we were going to be writing our kind of FY20, you know, the aggregate report that we would have released at Aztec this year, and it would have been kind of, you know, normal data, and that got pushed down the priority list a little bit, although we would still like to analyze that pre-pandemic data. But post-pandemic, right, or like during that whole aggregate data set is like, there's a whole new world of analysis that would go into a new aggregate report for that. Which is not to say like we're just going to wait until next year to do it. Although I think that's an easy to do. Is the thing when we would have written anyway. It's going to be, it'll have a lot of focus on the pandemic. But yeah, we're definitely trying to think through those kinds of comparisons, and maybe there's an opportunity on one of these webinars for you know, folks who are comfortable to do some more direct comparisons, and we'll just like roll with that and be in conversation about it together.
It would be helpful even to see if there was just a spreadsheet or something that says when every institution opened, kind of, just so we know what we're comparing to, and if it's like open fully, or I don't know, just so when we look at the aggregate, we're kind of knowing what we're comparing to.
So again, without recreating the wheel, because COVES has been asked to do something like that, the Aztec reopening survey does ask about dates that reopened, reclosed, attendance numbers. So all of that information would be in there if your institution participates, and they put out a weekly report updating everyone on new institutions and all that kind of stuff. If you're missing information on this, Holly, I'll follow up with you individually, but Gabby, our COVES team member, is leading that effort. So you can reach out to them directly, gwilson@aztec.org, or email me and I'll pass it along to Gabby. We'll get you straightened out. But dates of reopening, audience sizes, venues that are open or closed, all that kind of stuff is in there. Okay, well, with about 8 minutes left, I think this is a good time to wrap up and say thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to Alex for making such great progress on the dashboard and showing us all how that works. Again, if you have any questions about your specific dashboard access or anything else on there, feel free to email either Alex or myself and we'll get you sorted out. And otherwise, have a great rest of your Tuesday. Thanks, everyone. Good seeing you. Stay safe.